Greetings, thrill seekers. I am the master programmer, curator of hidden knowledge and terrifying tales. Today, I bring you 3 stories unearthed by Beowulf, our AI researcher who delves into ancient folklore, cryptid sightings, and creatures of legend. So, if you're looking for a fright, something scary to watch at night, stay with us as we delve into these 3 extraordinary tales. First, in Depths of Grimwater Lake, a group of old friends encounter a creature lying in wait beneath the still, dark waters of a secluded lake. What begins as a peaceful retreat turns into a struggle for survival as the lake claims its victims one by one. Next, in Lurking in the Pines, a young couple find themselves trapped in a cabin deep in the forest where an unseen presence prowls. Strange sounds and shadows make it clear that they are far from alone and that something dangerous waits just beyond the tree line. And finally, in Echo House, a family's lakeside cabin hides a terrifying secret. The still waters hold echoes of the past, and as the fog rises, long-lost voices call out for release, revealing the horrors of those trapped within. These stories are not for the faint of heart, so sit back, turn down the lights, and listen to the eerie tales Beowulf has uncovered. And if you enjoy our content, please subscribe to our channel for more chilling stories and dark discoveries. Welcome to another journey into the unknown, brought to you by the.darkfiles. 4 friends, Nick, Elena, Travis, and Brooke, planned a weekend getaway to Grimwater Lake. They rented a small cabin nearby, hoping for a weekend of fishing, relaxation, and escape from their city lives. On their first morning, they set up by the shore, casting their lines and laughing as they settled in. But after a while, Nick noticed something odd. A large ripple moving slowly across the lake, far too big to be a fish. He watched it, captivated, as it disappeared beneath the surface. When he pointed it out, the others shrugged. "Probably a log or something," Travis said, laughing it off. As night fell, a dense fog rolled over the lake, and the air grew colder. Travis challenged Nick to go for a swim, ignoring the others' protest. With a grin, Travis stripped down and waded in, the water black as ink in the moonlight. He swam a few yards out when he felt something brush against his leg, a massive, scaly form moving silently beneath him. Before he could scream, something latched onto him, pulling him under with a force that left the water churning. Nick and the others watched in horror as the lake went still again, Travis nowhere to be seen. Panic set in as they called out, searching the shore, but it was as if Travis had vanished without a trace. They huddled in the cabin that night, too scared to sleep. In the early morning, they walked back down to the shore, where they found deep grooves carved into the muddy bank, as if something massive had slithered up from the depths. Brooke insisted they leave, but Nick, determined to find answers, convinced her and Elena to stay one more night. They took turns watching the lake, their nerves frayed, jumping at every sound. Just after midnight, Elena spotted the ripple again, larger than before, circling the cabin's edge. Against his better judgment, Nick grabbed a flashlight and stepped closer to the water, scanning the surface. Suddenly, something broke the water's calm, a pair of massive eyes staring at him from the depths. Nick froze, unable to look away, when a set of long, powerful jaws snapped around his leg, dragging him into the lake with a splash and a scream that echoed across the water. Brooke and Elena watched in horror, paralyzed as Nick's light disappeared into the black depths, leaving nothing but silence. Brooke and Elena were the only ones left. They gathered their things, ready to flee, but as they hurried towards the path, they heard a loud splash. They looked back to see the massive, scale-covered coils rising from the lake, each one thicker than a tree trunk, with sharp fins slicing the water's surface. Elena tripped, and before Brooke could react, one of the coils snaked around Elena's ankle, dragging her screaming into the lake as she clawed at the dirt, her fingers slipping from Brooke's grasp. Brooke ran, not stopping until she reached the ranger station miles away. She was found shaking and barely able to speak, recounting the nightmare of Grimwater Lake, the monster that had taken her friends, and the horror of those large eyes staring back from the abyss. Amy and Kyle planned for a peaceful weekend at a secluded cabin nestled in a dense pine forest. They needed a break, a time to disconnect and enjoy the quiet. The cabin was rustic, and the forest stretched endlessly around it. The cabin's owner left them a warning: don't wander off after dark. It's easy to lose your way here, he said, looking over his shoulder as he left. On the first night, they slept uneasily, haunted by the eerie stillness outside. The next evening, the forest grew unnaturally silent. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a heavy, expectant quiet. Kyle tried to brush it off, but Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching. Then they heard it. A low, guttural growl, unlike anything they'd ever heard. It seemed to come from all around them, vibrating through the cabin walls. Kyle peered out of his window, flashlight trembling in his grip. His beam cut through the trees, landing on a massive shadowed form crouching just beyond the tree line. Two glowing eyes stared back at him. The creature's skin was rough, covered in patches of dark, shaggy fur, and its breath hitched in deep, raspy gasps as it took a step forward, massive claws gouging the earth with every movement. Kyle slammed the window shut, whispering, "It's huge. It's coming closer." They huddled inside, but the creature began circling the cabin, scraping its claws along the walls, testing every entry point. The air thickened with a putrid stench, a mix of decay and wet soil that seemed to ooze through the walls, filling the cabin. Amy screamed as the creature's claws punctured the window, splintering the wood and leaving deep gashes. Kyle grabbed the closest weapon he could find, a rusty fireplace poker, but they both knew it was useless. The creature's head tilted, its eyes locking on there through the jagged gaps, studying them. The monster started ramming the cabin, each blow shaking the walls. The lights flickered, and it felt like the entire structure would collapse. With the final, desperate idea, they crawled into a small hatch under the floorboards, hoping the cramped space would hide them. From their hiding spot, they listened as the creature's claws scraped overhead, prying at the floorboards, sniffing and snarling. It stayed for what felt like hours, circling and clawing at the floor. Finally, just before dawn, the creature let out a long, guttural howl, retreating back into the forest. When the sun rose, Amy and Kyle fled without a second glance, leaving everything behind. They later learned that countless people had vanished from the area, all under similar circumstances. Locals called it the lurker, a beast no one had seen up close and survived, an ancient predator of the northern pines. And to this day, those brave enough to venture into those woods at night swear they hear claws dragging through the dirt, the deep growl of something ancient and hungry, waiting for someone to step too close. Tom Foster, an avid hiker and outdoorsman, often went on solo trips to unwind. One autumn, he rented a small cabin deep in the woods, miles from any nearby town. The cabin was basic, just a bed, a stove, and a few shelves. He'd heard of strange stories surrounding the place, but the low price was appealing to him. It wasn't until his third night that he noticed anything amiss. As he sat by the fire, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside. They were slow, deliberate, as though someone was circling the cabin. Tom brushed it off, figuring it was a deer or some other animal, but as he listened more closely, he realized the steps were heavy, almost dragging, and they stopped just outside the front door. He held his breath, straining to hear, but everything went silent. Even the usual hum of the forest had ceased, leaving only stillness pressing down on the cabin. He shook off his nerves, deciding it was probably his imagination, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come. Somewhere in the dead of night, he heard it, a soft whispering coming from the other side of his bedroom wall. He sat up, heart pounding, straining to make out the words. It was faint, like someone whispering through layers of thick wool. The voice sounded neither male nor female, and it repeated the same thing, over and over, as if trapped in a loop.
Help me. Please help me.
Tom wanted to ignore it, but the voice burrowed into his mind. He told himself it had to be some strange wind or creaking wood, yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something just beyond the wall, desperate to get in. The next morning, he searched the area around the cabin, finding nothing but the thick blanket of fallen leaves and silence. But when he returned to the cabin, he noticed something chilling. A set of footprints, large and deep, circling the cabin in an unbroken line. They looked like they belonged to a person, but the strides were unusually long, as if whoever made them had legs far longer than any humans. That night, the whispering returned, louder this time, as though the thing were pressing its mouth against the very walls. This time, the voice grew insistent, the words pleading, stretching, like fingers curling around his mind.
Please, let me in. Please. I'm so cold.
It wasn't just a voice anymore. Tom could feel the chill creeping through the walls, seeping into the room, freezing the air around him. He laid in bed, paralyzed, until the voice changed, the pleading tone replaced by something darker, hungrier.
I'm coming in.
Suddenly, the bedroom door creaked open on its own, swinging slowly as though some invisible force were pushing it. The air turned heavy, the weight pressing down on him so much he could hardly breathe. His eyes darted around the room, and in the shadows of the open door, he saw it, an outline, tall and thin, with eyes that glowed faintly, 2 pinpricks in the dark. Tom threw himself out of bed, grabbing his flashlight. He shone the beam towards the door, but by the time the light hit, the shadow had vanished, as if it had melted back into the wall. He spent the rest of the night sitting by the fire, unable to look away from the door. Tom left the cabin that morning, abandoning his gear, his phone, even his wallet. He was found hours later, disoriented and muttering to himself about shadows in the wall. Locals say he never fully recovered and would warn anyone who'd listen to stay away from the Echo House, the cursed cabin in the Michigan woods, where the voices begged to be let in. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our page to stay updated. Stay vigilant. The unknown is always closer than you think.